Oh, this week is going to be action-packed on Mike Text It Out as we talk about deadly viruses, shady telecom companies, and shady Cupertino companies, and more, as we, together, as a people, check it out. Welcome to another action-packed Saturday, as we're going to go ahead and check it out and check out some of this tech news, as I always do on the #1 tech news show on YouTube, on my channel, in Virginia, on a Saturday in February. Alright? It's true. It's oddly specific, but it's true. And jumping right into our first story, which is kind of a continuation from last week. So last week, I mentioned that LG is skipping MWC because of the threat of the coronavirus. And at that time, I was like, okay, cool. It's just LG. But now, others then hopped on the bandwagon, y'all. Apparently, no one wants to put their employees at risk or be at risk, which makes sense because if you put your employees at risk, obviously there's going to be a whole thing with them coming back to work and you being like, I don't know about them. They might kill us. But since all that happened, they didn't just have to go ahead and cancel the whole shebang bang. So now the whole show is officially canceled because too many companies pulled out, which is a good thing. The risk is real, y'all. It's real, all right? They ain't trying to go and get sick and potentially die. I can respect that. I respect what they doing by pulling out. I respect any company that respects their employees. Speaking of that, in our next story, let's talk about Apple's retail workers. So Apple recently lost a lawsuit saying that they have to pay lost wages to employees that were forced to stay late, basically to do a bag check. So if employees opted to bring a bag, like they wanted to bring their phone and stuff, they had to undergo a bag check when they left, and they were forced to undergo this after they clocked out. Now, Apple's defense was, well, they don't have to bring their phone to work or bring a bag to work. It's just for employees that want to bring a bag. But it's dumb. Like, who doesn't bring their phone with them everywhere? Or maybe, like, sometimes I go to the gym after work or I have something to do after work. So I bring a bag with me with some clothes or some other things. And, yeah, if you're forcing them to stay in the store to do a bag check before they leave, then they should be paid for that time. So Apple lost the lawsuit. It's probably going to have to pay millions of dollars to those employees because basically they were forced to stay after work. And then one of the judges also quoted the fact that Tim Cook himself said that, an iPhone is an essential part of your life. I can't see leaving home without it. So you got people on the top end saying like, hey, this is an essential part of your life. And then in your stories, you're like, well, if you bring it, then you're going to be subject for a search, which you're not going to be paid for. So it's kind of one of those 1-2 punches, which is why Apple ended up losing the lawsuit. And I actually agree with the court on this one. Like, if you're going to force people to stay for a bag check, then do the bag check and then have them clock out after. Because if you're forcing somebody to stay at work just because they brought a bag, and this was up to, because, there might be a line of people waiting to check out. So it could be between 5 and 20 minutes from what this article was saying. So yeah, Apple should have lost this lawsuit, and they should have been paying up anyway. Speaking of shady stuff that companies do, Huawei and the US are still beefing. Alright, we thought it settled down, everything was returning to normal, and maybe we would see Huawei being able to do business in the US again. Wrong, because the Department of Justice are bringing new charges against Huawei based on old civil suits that have been settled already, that basically showed that they had stole intellectual property. So the reason that they're doing this is because while the civil suits had been settled and, gone and done, criminal charges were never brought against them for these suits. So there were never any criminal cases for these suits. So they're basically going back and like, hey, you've never been tried criminally for these civil suits in which you settled and admitted that you stole intellectual property. The U.S. government's also claiming that they had incentives for employees to steal information from other companies, and they basically had spies within other companies and were hiring employees trying to get information and steal trade secrets. So this is what they're claiming. Who knows if it's actually true or not? I'm not myself certainly not in a position to launch an investigation against Huawei or say for sure that they did any of this. So, I don't think that this whole Huawei thing is going to end for a very long time, I feel like the US government is just they don't trust them. And I don't see them allowing Huawei to do business in the US for a very long time. Huawei, of course, came back with a defense and was like, a lot of companies have civil suits for similar things. And they said that they have a lot less suits than someone like Apple or Samsung. And so basically they're saying like, it's BS. That's what they're claiming. Who knows if it's true? Who knows? All I know is, who can you trust? Who can you trust? Speaking of trust, can you trust your phone manufacturer to deliver you the security update to prevent this Android flaw that was discovered last week called Blue Frag, which allows people with malicious intent to use your phone's Bluetooth connection to install malware and or steal data. This only affects phones running Android 8 or 9, so Oreo and Pi. But the big issue with this is a lot of these phones that are running those operating systems don't regularly receive updates anymore. So it's really up to the manufacturer to roll out this update. Now, an update is available, a security fix is available for this, but if the manufacturers of those phones don't, roll out those updates to the phones themselves, and they're just not going to get updated, and that security flaw is always going to be there. Now, of course, since this is only a Bluetooth thing, it only affects people within close range of the hacker or the attacker, someone who's trying to do the malicious things. And you could always opt to turn off Bluetooth on your phone, to prevent it from being accessed. But that brings me to the biggest reason that I haven't delved back into Android, and that's the support. Like, okay, I understand that, a lot of these manufacturers, they release their phones or whatever, and then a few months later, a year later, they have a new phone, and it's really dicey as far as how long you're going to get support for that phone. And I will say that at least Apple, once it stops offering the, main OS updates that they come out with every year to the phone, at least they still provide security updates for a time after that. And we're talking about, 3 or 4 years typically before they even stop doing big line OS updates for each of their phones. And that's the main reason that I've stuck with an iPhone, despite a lot of Android phones being ahead feature and design wise. I will gladly admit that. I love, for instance, Samsung's new phones, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But I love the designs on those new phones. I like the hole punch camera thing. I think their designs are way ahead of Apple's, but I don't switch because I know that Apple's got me as far as timely updates and support. And I can't say that for most Android manufacturers, except for Google maybe. Google has been pretty good as far as their support, but this is an issue for Android in general, the fragmentation thing where, someone releases a phone and then some phones just never even get updated to the next version of Android that comes out because manufacturers already moved on, they're not supporting that phone anymore. So there does need to be a standardization around this, and I think that Google kind of needs to force their hands because they are the ones who are licensing the operating system. I mean, granted, the phone manufacturers can use the open source version of Android, but that they wouldn't get Google Play Store or Chrome or any of the apps that Google offers, and that version of Android is several versions behind the one that Google offers. So yeah, technically they could fire back against Google and we're like, well, we'll just use the open source version, but most of them aren't going to do that because if you're selling a flagship phone, you're going to want to have the Play Store. So Google, I feel like they could have a lot more control over this than they do. They just kind of, they want manufacturers to support their phones for at least 2 years, but is it really happening? Not across the board. So that is a big issue in my opinion. If you are running Android version 8 or 9, make sure to check for security updates to see if it's available. I would recommend, if it's not available, to kind of check on the manufacturer of your phone, go to their website and see if they have anything posted about when the update will be available. In the meantime, you could always turn off Bluetooth if you're worried about it. And last but not least, let's talk about Samsung Unpacked. So I'm not really going to go into the details of all the phones that got released or announced this week, but I will say that Samsung's got some cool looking phones, like the Galaxy Z Flip. So this kind of sucks for Motorola because they came out with the Motorola Razr. Admittedly, I was excited about it. I mentioned it. But the Galaxy Z Flip, spec-wise, is a lot better. And it used the glass screen. And it has this weird like tabletop mode. Like you can do a half fold to set it on the table to kind of use it for video conferencing. And I believe it's like a little bit cheaper. They're both around the same price. When we're talking about performance and screen technology and all that, then I don't know, that Galaxy phone is looking a lot better, especially if you were considering getting a foldable phone, at least one that folds into a smaller phone. Personally, I'd be interested to try it, but I definitely wouldn't buy a phone like that. Like, I'm fine with the size of my phone. I already have a smaller phone anyway, so having it fold wouldn't really save that much space in my pocket, so I'm not interested. I'd be more so interested in something like the Galaxy Fold, where you get like a huge phone, and to me, that's like more of a benefit of having this foldable device. But there definitely will be a market for this. I can see that, and it's still a pretty cool device. You're still not going to be on the level of the Galaxy S20 or the S20 Plus or the S20 Ultra as far as specs, but like I said, it's definitely a lot better than what Motorola's offering. So unless you're like committed to that Motorola's design, if you're looking for a folding phone, I think the Z Flip kind of like stole all the attention away from Motorola. At least for right now. We'll have to see how things shake out. Speaking of S20, yeah, Samsung, they changed the name. They jumped up a whole decade on us. So it makes sense. It was reported late last year that Samsung was going to change the name to S20 to align the number with the year, which makes a lot of sense. So that way, like 2021, the S21, and that kind of gives consumers like, okay, well, this is the phone that came out this year. It's a lot easier to keep up with the version number, whichever phone they're getting. They don't have to guess like, oh, is the S9 or the S10, the S11 the newest one? Like, now you'll know like, hey, 2020 S20, boom, there we go. But those phones, now they're gonna have the high refresh rate, 120 hertz, at least at 1080p. Those high refresh rate screens, and what they're doing with the cameras is just insane. So the S20 Plus and S20 Ultra have 4 cameras. The S20 have 3. The S20 Ultra has 100 times zoom. Now, most of it is digital zoom, but still, that's crazy. Like, you can get super in depth. You can look up someone's nostril, see right into their brain with that phone. I don't know if that's true or not, but I want to try it. Now, pricing wise, Samsung, they've been on the cusp, that Apple cusp, for a while. So remember when the iPhone 10 came out and it was $1,000, everybody's like, and now Samsung's, the S20, regular S20 starts off at $1,000. So they're right there. I think the Ultra is like $1,400, and I believe the Plus is around $1,200. So they've caught up. They've caught up to Apple as far as pricing, and I think that's what we're going to see going forward with the flagships, because I don't think that we're in the same phone market as we were before, and I think that Apple has to catch up as far as what they're offering on the lower price end. The iPhone 11 is still really good, but it's still $700. I think they need to offer an even lower option. Samsung's kind of got it locked as far as their lineup. When it comes to the high end, mid range, and then lower end, they have it all on lock. They have 800 different phone models. So I think that it's okay for the flagships to be over $1,000. And I know people are gonna be like, "So you got money. You got money." And like, no, because now it's gotten to the point where you probably most people don't really need the flagship. It's just like you're getting this because you want the best version of the phone, but the phone that's $500 will probably do all the stuff that you need. So that's why I think it's fine. Jeff had the iPhone XS last year, which the model he had was like around $1,100. And then this year he went down to the 11 because it was just like, well, we're not using a lot of these features. They have the OLED screen is nice, but is it really worth paying that much extra? So I think that the pricing is going to change. I'm fine with it, because the thing is, if you don't want to buy those phones, there's a lot, especially in the Android side, there are a lot of phones that are around $500 that are very good. But back on the subject of the S20, I think those phones and the Z Flip, they look pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. Like I said, from the design standpoint, I think that Samsung's been ahead for a while. I think they offer some of the best designs as far as smartphones. And then they continue to innovate and try new things. Like, not every new thing sticks. I think one thing that Apple probably will take from Samsung and other manufacturers is the high refresh rate on their phones. They have it. They've been doing it for the iPad Pro for a while, so it only makes sense that it would come to their phones eventually. So I think that that's something they're going to steal. As far as foldables, I think it's going to be a while before they jump into that, but they'll definitely be there. They'll get there. Like I said, I didn't go too in depth with specs or anything because I was originally going to, but there's a lot of other videos that came out this week that are already doing that. So I just wanted to give you my brief thoughts and impressions on that phone. And speaking of brief, this news briefing is over. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and always do at least 2 things at the same time. Peace.